The Australian Grand Prix, the traditional curtain raiser of the Formula 1 season, is back as the first race of the season in 2025. But let's have a look at some of the most incredible moments from the Australian Grand Prix over the years. I've had to narrow it down to 5 for this video. Very difficult to do, of course. There's so many to choose from. Some good, some bad, and some ugly moments in here as well. But let's dive in, guys. So, the Australian Grand Prix joined the Formula 1 racing calendar in 1986 as the bookend to the actual season. These days it was held in Adelaide in Australia, around the streets of that circuit, and being the final race of the calendar, it of course played host to the 1986 Formula 1 deciding race as a whole as well. Alain Prost, Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet went into this race knowing that whoever won the race most likely would have won the World Championship as well. And it looked as though it was going Nigel Mansell's way. He wasn't in the lead of the race, but he was very much in championship position. However, despite Alain Prost coming into the pits because of tyre trouble and changing his tyres, Nigel Mansell opted not to do that and stayed out because his team told him to as well. And colossally, that was Nigel Mansell, who of course had his tyre blowout spectacularly down the long straight in Adelaide, ruining his chances of a championship in 1986. Nelson Piquet was also pitted shortly after that on safety grounds, and Alain Prost went to a very unlikely championship in 86, and of course back-to-back championships as well, in a rare instance where the guy not driving the fastest car on the grid actually won the title, something that I think Max Verstappen emulated in 2024. That car was very much not the fastest throughout the whole season, definitely in sections of it. But as dramatic as that was, let's talk about the shortest race in Formula 1 history. 1991, an absolute deluge at the Adelaide circuit. There was nothing really riding on this. Ayrton Senna had already won the championship earlier on in Japan in the previous round, so there wasn't really anything riding on this, and the weather conditions were absolutely horrific. We've never seen rain like this, only on very few occasions in the modern era of Formula 1. I hesitate to call this a modern era. I'm calling it a modern era because it was on TV, so we could see it live and it was happening. But yeah, the race was red flagged after just 14 laps. Now, I know some people are going to say, when I said, oh, that's the shortest race in F1 history, they will point out the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix, but I refuse to recognize that as a race because they never raced at any point. At least in this one, they did actually race. Ayrton Senna did win the race, Nigel Mansell in second and Gerhard Berger in third for this one. But yeah, the shortest race in Formula 1 history that actually had any kind of racing. 50% points were, of course, produced for this race in the end. But let's go ahead to 1994, still at Adelaide, and another championship decider, this time between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill. Oh, very much an incident that divides opinion to this day. Michael Schumacher came into this one, I think, about 1 point ahead of Damon Hill. It was very close in the championship. Hill, of course, winning in Japan in very dramatic and wet circumstances, and a very dangerous race indeed, and that was in Japan. But the weather was a lot better for Adelaide, but unfortunately there was a very stormy bit of conditions out on the track itself, if you know what I mean, because Michael Schumacher was leading in the early stages of this one, made a mistake, ran wide, damaged his car. Some people say that he knew he damaged his car and deliberately hit Damon Hill. The contact was made between the two of them, and both of them were out of the race. Damon Hill tried to continue, went into the pits, but unfortunately his Williams mechanics could not repair the car, and therefore Michael Schumacher was declared champion. Some would say by default. I think if James Hunt was still around, would have said default. That's what he said when Ayrton Senna did it to Alain Prost back in the day. This was not quite as egregious, not because of the speed and everything like that, but yeah, very much an incident that divides opinion to this day. Maybe I'll make a video about that one day and give my full take on it. But yeah, dodgy to say the least, I would say. But let's go into the Melbourne era next. 2002. We're all anticipating the start of the 2002 Formula 1 World Championship. Who's going to come out on top? Can anybody challenge Michael Schumacher after winning 2 in a row? And Michael Schumacher, who won the championship this year, would of course match the great Juan Manuel Fangio in terms of 5 championships in Formula 1. Well, it definitely got off to a dramatic start because the likes of Rubens Barrichello and Ralf Schumacher created a absolutely iconic image in Formula 1 history. the massive start line pile-up going into turn 1 unsurprisingly caused a red flag. And that race in 2002 was very much a race of attrition. Barely anybody managed to finish it. But one of the people that managed to finish it was Mark Webber. Webber, in his debut race in Formula 1, driving for Minardi, managed to finish in 5th place, which back then was good enough for 2 points. I think those were the only 2 points he scored of the season, and probably the only 2 that Minardi managed as well. Because of his efforts, despite not finishing in the top 3, Webber was allowed to go onto the podium with his team principal Paul Stoddart and create an iconic image. One of the very few times that an Australian driver has stood on the podium in Formula 1 at the Australian Grand Prix. That time, it didn't count for anything in terms of a podium, but Daniel Ricciardo was hoping that his podium in 2014 was going to be enough to become the first Aussie to stand on the podium. And yes, he did stand on the podium in his home race. However, it was later disqualified for it. It was such a bittersweet pill for Daniel Ricciardo. Very bittersweet day. Very much incredible the fact that he managed to get up there. Everybody was thinking coming into this with the new V6 turbo hybrid era engines and everything that Red Bull were very much at the bottom of the order. You know, they were looking awful during testing. They could barely get the car to run. That Renault engine was an absolute bag of bolts, particularly in the Red Bull. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, despite all that, he managed to finish second on the road. Hamilton was out of the race early on with a mechanical issue. Nico Rosberg absolutely walked it to win the first race of the V6 turbo hybrid era. And yeah, Ricciardo's pace was incredible, and the fact he managed to finish the race despite the unreliability of that car and that engine in particular was extremely impressive. But unfortunately, I believe it was a fuel flow rate or a fuel sample or something like that he actually was disqualified. So another time when an Aussie has stood on the podium but didn't count for anything. But can Oscar Piastri change that this weekend? I hope so. I would love to see it. But yeah, those are 5 of my most iconic, unforgettable, incredible moments from the Australian Grand Prix over the years. I could easily do 10, 15, 20 of these, but I've had to narrow it down for this 5 video here. And I'll do another 5 next year, I promise. We'll go through all the iconic moments because there are so many at the end of the day. Which is your favourite moment from the Australian Grand Prix over the years, guys? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And we'll see you soon for some more Formula 1 content here on the F1Chronicle.com. Have a great day, guys, and I hope we have a fantastic race on Sunday morning as well. See you very soon.